Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Cosmic Leadership Podcast. I'm so happy to be with you today. I'm really excited because I have an incredible human being with us. I found her on Instagram. I also must confess that I heard from some of you that you were really interested in this topic, which is why I went seeking it out. It's definitely an odd one, but I think something that we can all really learn. I guarantee you there's not a single person listening today that has more experience in this particular field than this person. Today, I get to interview Nichole Hosein. She is a holistic health practitioner with a focus on iridology and sclerology. She uses the eyes as a tool to uncover people's health as well as a way to monitor their healing. She runs a practice called Three Sprouts Holistic, and I am so excited to chat with her today. Thank you so much for being with us, Nichole.
My pleasure. I'm so excited to talk about the eyeballs.
Yay. Okay. First, can you explain what is iridology? What is sclerology?
Yeah. So iridology it's been practiced for a very long time. It just kind of came to the forefront in America in the 60s. Dr. Bernard Jensen created, but it's a study of the iris. So depending on the color, the different markers in it, sometimes there's freckles and stuff. It can tell us a lot about our genetic health or things that are maybe more chronic or things that are weaker, and we can dive into that. And then the sclerology is the study of the sclera, which is the white part of the eye, and all of those red lines, which are connected to different organs and body systems. So you can study that. That's more like acute, what's going on right now, what's stressing the body. And so you can see different areas of the body and how they're maybe pulling energy from other places. And it's putting them together is really interesting because you can look at genetic tendencies versus like what's going on right now. And you can track certain things change as the body heals. So it's really cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So how did you get interested in this? Where did you first hear about it? Tell us the story.
Yeah. So I grew up always nosy, instinctually.
Okay.
And my mom says you would always look at people's eyes, and I would have a very hard time talking to people if I couldn't like look at them. And so I had this kind of, I want to say energy where I could look at people and know, like, I would say to my mom, like, that kid, that he looks sad. And she's like, how do you know that? It's like his eyes. So when I got into my studies as a holistic practitioner, there were courses on iridology and sclerology. And I was like, I'm obsessed because now it added those layers of me always staring at people. But now I'm like, now I really stare at people. I have very open conversations. So it was, at the time I was living in New York, and as a practitioner, there's a lot of limitations on testing, and even expensive, they're invasive, even kids with trauma and needles and getting blood work, it was hard. And I was just like, well, what if I could just look at their eyes? So I was a special needs child, and I knew how hard that was. And I was like, let me perfect it. Let me study this and obsess over it so that I can help people and it just, the pandemic was kind of nice because everything went virtual. So I started eyes from all over the world. And I was like, that's really neat. So it kind of launched into, let's look at people from India and Africa and now I can kind of piece together genetic predispositions and where they're from. It's just been a really, really awesome.
Wow. That is such a cool thing. And I think the other amazing thing about it too, is that you just followed your passion. Like you were taking all of these holistic health courses, you found this course and just thought, okay, this is the great thing to do. And then the pandemic hit and you had no choice but to just look at eyeballs on a screen.
Exactly. And I was very blessed. There was my friend, and I lived in a very small town in upstate New York. And my friend's
Where did you live?
Syracuse. Well, outside of Syracuse. That's kind of like,
I'm from Rochester.
Oh, you get it.
Yeah, I do. It's freezing.
Yes, I know. I don't miss it. I live in Tampa.
Okay.
But my friend's grandmother, when I started getting really into it, she's like, my grandmother studied that. She's like almost 90 now. And she had some of the old books from Dr. Bernard Jensen, who's like the pioneer of creating these into like studies and practice. And I have like some of his old books, like his old, slides from machines that don't even exist anymore. So it was really nice to see, how was it originally taught and go back to that. So I've been very, very blessed in that regard, that in the middle of nowhere, there's somebody else that knew about this and had all these tools. So
isn't that just such a blessing to like know that this has been around for years?
Oh yeah. I
don't know why we decided to forget about it and go with testing, because I have to say, honestly, sometimes the tests don't work on me. Like I'll take the test and it says everything is fine. And I know that it's not. And I feel myself. I know when something's off,
Well, that's the cool part with the sclera is you can see something before it's an issue. So you can kind of like, you might say you don't feel fine, but your blood work's not at that point. But the sclera will identify what we call like a simple stress line. So something that's starting to weaken. So you might be symptomatic, but maybe your labs don't show it.
Oh
So
my
that's
gosh.
where,
Please
yeah.
explain to us how this works. So will you show me on my eyeball? Is that
Oh yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
Oh
I
my
mean,
gosh.
you're gonna have to get really close.
Okay. I'm going to get really close. So for those of you watching on YouTube, this is going to be really fun for you to see just how much makeup a person can get onto their face.
You're so cute. So, I mean,
You
I
see
can't
it?
see a whole lot, but what I can see is you have blue eyes. So the
Yes.
base is blue. So in iridology, and you have a little bit, I don't, people will be able to see this, a little dark ring around the outer edge. We call these sclerofrims. And I
Okay.
can kind of see if you look around her pupil, um, that's where the gut is. So there is a little bit of kind of like what we would call a constricted area. So the spacing around your pupil is a little less than like a third of the way out. So these people, if we can talk about poop, generally they
Yes.
bottle in some of their feelings and they're slower moving bowels.
Yep.
So I have a lot of poop talk with people.
I think poop talk is great.
So
Yeah.
important. Yeah, but when you come to the eyes and you look at, so I start with what is the color of the eyes. So there is a big debate, is there brown and blue only? Because sometimes people will have different color eyes, and as they go through their healing journey, they do come back to blue. My dad was one of those examples. He had brown
Oh,
eyes in life, and they're blue now.
okay.
So I still believe that there's the mixed eye type, which is the people that are like green and hazel, but they were born like that. There's no
Okay.
like blue in the background. So yours are very blue. So the blue eyes, kind of the predispositions are, weaker lymphatic system, kidneys, adrenals, joints, skin,
Yep.
and lungs. So, the blue eyes are going to have eczema more commonly, allergies, asthma, that kind of stuff. And you have that darker ring around the outer edge, which is a sclerofrim. So these people, they're very resilient, very determined. Like they want to do something, they're going to do it, and they're going to achieve their goals. It's fun when you're
True.
working with kids. I'm like, let that kid do its thing.
Yeah.
They're very strong-willed, but their skin is, even though a blue eye, their skin is generally weaker with the sclerofrim, they're even more sensitive. So they have to be mindful of sweating regularly and putting natural stuff on their skin, and then the
Mhm.
brown eyes. So I have brown eyes. Minerals are a big thing for us because we're more prone to like endocrine issues. We're more prone to mineral loss, which kind of equates to the mineral issues, heart
Okay.
issues, iron issues. So it all comes back to really like if people with brown eyes, I'm like, you need a lot of minerals in your diet. Like I'm like nettle leaf tea, pumpkin seeds, coconut water, like just rotate it in.
Okay.
And then the mixed eye type, if you see somebody in their entire life, it's been, like a light brown with some green in it, but they're not blue. They're somewhere
Hmm.
between green and hazel. Their liver and blood sugar are things that are more notorious to be problematic. So they'll be the ones more likely to have like insulin resistance, or you'll see freckles show up in their iris more commonly because their liver doesn't filter as well as somebody else's. So right
Wow.
off the bat, your eye color. It's like I can say like,
Wow.
you gotta support your skin, you got to support your lungs. Yeah.
You're super right on. I have a myriad of health issues, but I do have to sweat at least 4 or 5 times a week, or I just cannot go on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
So
am
your
super
skin,
sensitive to everything, allergic to
yeah.
everything.
Yeah. Your skin's more of like a sponge than the average person.
It is a
So
sponge. That's so
it is.
true.
Yeah. Natural products only.
Yes, for
Yes.
sure. What about the white part of the eye?
So the sclera, that was really interesting because it's very overwhelming. So you guys, if you're listening, you can go online, type in iridology chart, sclerology chart, and you can start mapping where you see different patterns. But the sclera, we look at lines. And
Okay.
when you have like a long day and you're in front of a screen, you might have more red irritation. I'm not talking about those. They're the ones that stay there. And
Yeah.
so the general guide is if they're straight, we call them simple stress lines. So these can be prior to you actually being symptomatic, and they can grow
Okay.
closer to the iris. And any line that gets closer to the iris, that's more you're symptomatic. It can start squiggling. So squiggling is
Okay.
congestion. So you don't want to see that in like your heart area. You don't want to see
Okay.
that, in your bowels. It's like
Yeah,
it's
of
not okay.
course.
You can have pockets. So you can have red lines that form pockets. And so
Okay.
that's trapped toxins. So I do see that a lot with the thyroid. Like the thyroid, the body just kind of like pushes it away and closes it off from working with the rest of the body because there's something irritating it, or sometimes I see that in the bowels.
Hmm.
You can have little black dots. So I see a lot of kids with these, especially the top is the brain. So
Okay.
the lines that come down with like a black dot, almost like a pencil, just a little dot.
Yeah.
And so these show up if there's like fungal or bacterial overgrowth. So people that are living in mold or they're dealing
Ooh.
with a lot of yeast. So think of the kids that eat a lot of carbs. I'm like, oh, look.
Hmm.
But I was very humbled 2 years ago. We were in a house that was very moldy. We moved down to Florida. The HVAC was very problematic.
Oh,
And
yeah.
my kids got those off, and I was like, oh man. So mold is definitely a reason they can show up. And
Okay.
then they can kind of look a little erased as they start healing.
Okay.
You can have forks. So like,
Hmm.
one organ will go try and pull energy from the other one. So the endocrine system as a whole, you can see that moving around.
Yeah.
So, depending on what they look like, you can tell a lot about what's going on.
Wow.
Squiggles and forks and dots,
How
basically.
cool is that?
Yeah. And the sclera does heal. People ask, the iris doesn't change sometimes, like, it's genetic predisposition. So there's certain things that might change. You might find your eyes are more blue. Like my dad, his eyes changed a lot, but he was very unhealthy and then switched to like completely different lifestyle.
Okay.
But sclera, usually within like 12 weeks of you doing something that's effective, you can start seeing
Mhm.
those lines pull away from the iris and they fade or they hook away from the iris. So anything that's pulling away, that's a good sign. So I always tell people every 3 months, go look in the mirror, see where these lines are and try and track their healing.
I mean, that is just kind of genius. So
I know.
I hear you about the mold thing. I have had mold illness. I moved out to the desert to try to escape mold. I could not. I every new apartment I would move into would have mold again.
Yeah.
And I know that my eyes were a complete mess while all of that was happening as well. I'm
Hmm.
still healing. It's still a journey. It's still 9,000 supplements and saunas and all of the
Yeah.
stuff.
It's a lot of
Um,
work.
but I can tell you truly, when it was at its absolute max, like I was working in a basement for my job at the time, which was really, really bad for my body and soul. And I had the dots you're talking about up
Mhm.
here. And
Yep.
I truly, I don't think those went away for like 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
It really took a lot of time. And I still am a mold sick person. I still dehumidify my entire house. I have a energy recovery ventilator. I have all the things to try to make sure that it doesn't happen again. Um, but that just can cause such a collapse of all of your other systems.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at the eyes, are you able to see like I know you mentioned sometimes the eye shows it before it will show up on a test. Like, where
Mhm.
do you find this the most?
I mean, the sclera is, depending on where it is, I mean, um, the endocrine system, especially for women, that's usually where I see like the thyroid will start showing up and like you do blood work and they're like, my blood work's fine. But then they're like dealing with all the hypothyroid symptoms, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, okay, well, let's start working on that. So you can see the thyroid does show up a lot, gut issues, but the gut issues, I really like looking at the iris
Okay.
because right on your pupil is your gut. So people looking at this, there's three different kind of colors that you can have. So if it's brown, it's more toxins like liver related. And your liver filters out toxins, environmental chemicals and stuff. So if you have more of a brown ring around your pupil, toxins in your bowel support your liver to help get them out too.
Okay.
If it's more yellow, it's kidney stress. And that's impacting. So things like yeast are more common there. And then
Oh.
you can have orange. So you'll see people with like around their pupil. And this is why it's hard not to look at people and be like, do you have this? Like you can
Yeah.
ask yourself, but anything like orangey is likelihood of blood sugar imbalance. So depending on even
Okay.
what's around their pupil, you can tell how their gut is doing. And even, right around the pupil, you can see like a lot of breaks in the fibers. So like the fibers of the iris become very loose. That's leaky gut. You can see like
Okay.
the black of the pupil start opening up. So instead of it being blue here, you see the black kind of pushing into the colors, and that's leaky gut. So that can kind of seal up and heal. So you right off the bat, you can look at just around the pupil and kind of gauge, do you have leaky gut? Are you absorbing your nutrients? Are you more likely to have blood sugar issues? And so that's a
Yeah.
good place to start. And then the sclera kind of solidifies it. So the bottom is a lot of gut. So the bottom
Okay.
of the brain at the top, you have like your heart and your lungs, and then you have your gut, your liver, endocrine, like your uterus and stuff at the bottom.
Okay.
So I follow the gut there and
Wow.
I piece it together.
Okay. So in your practice, tell me how it goes. Like someone comes in, they're like, I have low energy, my thyroid looks fine. What's the first step?
Well, I do have, so when they work with me, I have a very annoyingly long symptom tracker. So it kind of
Okay.
puts it under different, root causes like parasites, for example.
Right.
I can't, as a holistic practitioner, say people have parasites, but I can look at symptoms that are congruent with parasites and
Right.
and the eyes. So a little fun tidbit. Historically, farmers would look for something called a radicularis in their eyes, and it would look like rays of sun kind of engraved in their iris. And you see a lot of people with these. And I can't say, hey, you have parasites, but it does mean there's something in your gut that doesn't belong. So if they do this checklist and they're scoring high for parasites, and then they got this in their eyes, or maybe they got like a lot of brown around their pupil, I'm like, this is going to be fun. So you have it. So I do the checklist, see if anything stands out, because then they kind of look at their symptoms too, and that can help without looking at the labs, which is obviously a lot less, it's cheaper,
Right. Yeah.
And they send me pictures of their eyes, and I go through the iris, I go through the sclera, I write a summary, and then we figure out what are the avenues for addressing that, like as a holistic practitioner, are we looking at diet? Are we looking at lifestyle? Like, women are stressed. That is a big thing I deal with. It's just the nervous system,
Yes. Yes.
So that's usually, and I tell them, I'm like, nothing for 8 weeks. You got to work on your nervous system. And they're like, what do you mean? I just want to take all the pills. And I'm like, it's not going to make a difference if you're stressed out, So that's.
I 100% agree with you. I found that in my own healing. Like, I could do all the things that I'm supposed to do. And as long as I'm a stress case and not doing my meditations, not doing my yoga, not doing my, even just like a half salamander 3 or 4 times a day really can make a huge difference. For those of you who have no idea what the hell I'm saying, there are lots of different nervous system calming practices. One of them is called the half salamander. You're welcome to Google it. I think it's really great. But so they nervous system balance for 8 weeks before they take a single herb or pill or anything.
Yeah. And they sometimes fight me on it because their nervous system is so tightly wound that they can't understand that they need to, you know? But, and you can tell nervous system. So in the iris around the outer edge, people will have rings.
Yeah.
And so it can be inherited trauma up to 4 generations. But sometimes it's, I joke like, us 70s and 80s babies, I don't know when you were born, but we were
79.
There you go. So a lot of feeling guilty for slowing down, people pleasers, go, go, go. Like we have very strong work ethic, but we really don't know how to chill. And I think a lot of it was, we came from a lot of immigrant parents, and it was like, what do you mean Saturday you want to sit on the couch? Get up, you're being lazy. So we're trying to undo that, but it's like we're innately just not able to. So I see a lot of these nerve rings around the outer edge, and these are the people that just really suck at slowing down. So I'm like, can you read a book? And they're like, no, I'm distracted. And I'm like, your nervous system can't even read a book, So you can't flood the body with anything except working on your nervous system. You're just going to quickly burn through your minerals. And so those nerve rings, they can be intense. People can have like 5 of them, just stacked in their iris, and they can look very deeply engraved. And I have noticed there's not a lot of literature on what they look like when they're healing, but I have followed enough practitioners in this journey that have done significant healing, and it almost looks like they're still there, but they're softened. Yeah. And so that's been really nice. I'm like, okay, it's just like lightly brushed over, almost like somebody just put like a little spray paint over it.
Yeah.
That's when I'm like, okay, your nervous system is getting better. So that's been really nice to see.
What kinds of can we geek out about nervous system for a minute?
Yeah.
So what kinds of nervous system things do you have people do?
I mean, some of the basic things like grounding, depending on where you live.
Yeah.
I'm from originally, there's not but I'm like, just go hug a tree. I don't care if it's minus 32. I work with people, even like I just say disconnecting from people and devices. And it is so hard for people. I know. Reading a book, if you can practice reading a book, not a studying book, like something you enjoy. Yeah. Coloring gets both sides of the brain going. Prayer, meditation, journaling, I say disconnecting from people and devices. And like you even ask like for moms, I'm like, go have a bath. And they're like, but I got to bring something in there. And I'm just like, can you just sit with yourself and your thoughts? Yeah. And it, sometimes it's before they go to bed or when they wake up, I give them activities like, and I know as a mom, we go to bed and we have this thing in our head. It's like, didn't do this, got to do this. And we overthink.
The list continues.
Sometimes it's just taking Post-its and putting on your nightstand. Like, I'm taking it out of my mind. I'm sitting in here. It's safe. We'll deal with it tomorrow. So just that loading piece is really good. Stretching, like yoga, whatever people have to do. But it's just that being able to disconnect and reconnect with yourself. And that looks different for everybody. True. I'm sure you're more of an expert at that than me.
Oh, but I always love to hear from holistic health practitioners too, because I feel like my approach to nervous system regulation is all about your emotions. Mm-hmm. And I find that more health oriented people, it's also about like the body and how you can get the body to kick back in to be able to heal itself, Yeah.
And sometimes it's focusing on getting a lot of minerals in the body, So I do find Some people like, when you're stressed and you're go, 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 your adrenals will burn through what I call the macro minerals, calcium, magnesium, sodium, and potassium. So something simple like drinking more coconut water, you're going to replenish those minerals to offset the stress. And suddenly people are feeling like, I'm tired at the right time. My nervous system's so there is like, I really think there's an importance of minerals. And that's the
Agreed.
common thing that's overlooked. And it's super easy to test for. But again, brown eyes, we need more, you know?
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
What do you think of the Kinton sachets? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Are they the ones that come in glass?
They used to come in glass. Now they come in like a foil wrapper thing because too many people are puncturing
Breaking them.
themselves with the
That was going to be my concern. I know people like them. I've not used them personally.
Okay.
But I know people have used them and they do really like them because they're very natural, but they're easy to access. And yeah,
Yeah.
now that with glass, that actually makes me happier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I have punctured myself also, but I had a client once who was taking them a lot to try to rebalance her nervous system.
Yeah.
And she actually like kind of got like a hack thing in her hand. And yeah. Anyway, coconut water is easier. I'm just including another option for those of us that are so glucose sensitive. We can't even do coconuts.
Yeah. But I mean, nettle leaf tea is great. And in the summer, what I do is I steep some nettle leaf tea and I put it in a big mason jar and I just leave that in the fridge. And it's really, really hydrating too. That's, no carbs in that. Pumpkin seeds are great. I'm a big proponent of seafood. I think seafood's really good for certain people. If you're plant-based, there's other things, but broth, with or without meat, tons of veggies, like just loading up on some of the foods God gave us. There's a lot of fear in food. And I'm like, just go back to like actual food and eat that. It's good for you. Yeah.
Get some veggies in there. See what happens. Do you ever feel like you're stuck and you're not quite sure what to do next? Do you ever feel like maybe the best times of your life might be behind you and you're not sure where to go from here? I completely understand. I work with a lot of people in the same situation. If you are going through this sort of life transition time, I'm here to help. I find that with a lot of my clients, the life transition time overlaps with a lot of other things. Parents aging, raising children, switching careers, relationship changes, all of those kinds of things. I believe in the ability of all of us to transition through these things with ease and with grace if you have the right guide. I am so happy to work with you through any and all of these things. I find that a lot of trauma healing can happen during this time because we start to look at how that has impacted our lives so far. So if you're starting to notice yourself going through changes, wanting to see more change in your life, and wanting to let go of these older traumas, check out my website. We're going to include the link below. You can book just a single session with me to start if that feels right for you, either using EMDR or internal family systems or IFS therapy, also called parts work. Or you can book a transformational healing session, my own modality, to try to work through whatever's going on a spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical level all at the same time. I really recommend this. I find it's the fastest way through. But of course, this is up to you, and I have lots of different options to suit every need. I would love to walk with you through this transition time. I hope to hear from you soon. You have a very international clientele. Mm-hmm. What do you find are like the top 5 things that you see first in a person's eyeball?
I mean, if we want to talk where Americans are the most sick.
Of course we are. Yes.
Allergies, leaky gut. I mean, we definitely, I do find that there's like Middle Eastern culture, there's a lot of more iron being low, and I can see that. Sometimes the skin will actually look a little bit more blue when the iron's low. Here, it's just a lot of allergies and sensitivities, blood sugar irregularities. But I mean, the most common things I see just across the world, the nervous system is number 1. They really got to work on that. Leaky gut, thyroid issues. I don't know what happened in the last 5 years. I mean, I kind of do, but there's been a huge shift. And I think the thyroid, if we talk about it too, it's like speaking your mind, and we went through an unfortunate time where everybody had an opinion, but if it was different, you couldn't speak. So it didn't matter what people thought. There was really no easy way out of it. Let's just be realistic.
I think we're still in that period, aren't we?
Oh my God. So many ways.
Yeah.
But I am seeing the thyroid show up a lot. And I'm like, and it's not like, oh my God, they have thyroid disease. It's just there's like some sort of, I wonder about the emotional component. Are people not able to speak? Are they not feeling comfortable speaking their mind because there was such a strong, you think this way or that way, and otherwise I'm not
Yeah.
talking to you? It was a hard time.
It was a really hard time.
Yeah, the thyroid is a big one. One of the fun things I see is a lot of women that get those copper IUDs. I'm actually seeing like pigments, freckles in the eyes show up in the uterine area. And I'm like, do you have an IUD? And they're like, yeah. So that's been interesting. I can kind of tell,
Okay.
what's happening. Yeah, those are kind of the blood sugar. So if you see an eye that's like blue, but they kind of turned a little bit more green, that's usually
Hmm.
blood sugar. So that's, they're like, oh, my eyes were blue as a baby and now they're green. I see that a lot, especially in the States.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the
Wow.
fermentation signs, so especially with kids, man, the kids, they love their sugar and their carbs. And then I'm like, oh, you got a fermentation sign. So I see that a lot
Mhm.
too. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I guess it doesn't really surprise me that Americans are the most sick. It's the diet, right?
I think
Standard
it's,
American diet.
if we look at the farming here too, it's so commercialized.
I
So it's
know.
heavily sprayed with pesticides. We got glyphosate that's banned everywhere else in the world.
I
And
know.
then, the commercialized farming, our soil is so depleted. And so
Hmm.
not getting that kind of dense nutrients you would, if you're growing something in France, it's just
Right.
different. And
It
so
is
we're not
different.
getting those dense nutrients and we have no chill. We don't know how to slow down. It's just,
True.
Americans work hard and I love that, but I just feel like we don't know how to just relax. And that, you think of I tell people one of the things we do is you got to learn to sit down and eat your food. We're eating on the go, we're passively watching TV while we're doing it. We're not, if you think of like a European, they're sitting down like in France, everything
I
flows.
know.
They go home, they
Yeah.
decorate it's like a whole event,
Yeah.
and they're
It
not having
is.
issues with their digestion. We are.
Right.
But just the simplicity of chewing your food. We forget to do that. We drink a lot with our meals,
Yeah.
so there's certain things that we can definitely help just by choosing, how we eat, when we eat. Are we sitting down?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Are we sitting down and are we not driving a car or, grading homework or, whatever we're doing while we eat?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're
Yeah.
always doing something that's not just
Yes.
eating.
That's
Yeah.
right. I think this is like a really popular misconception. I worked all over the world for years and years and years. And when I got back, I had sicknesses. I had sicknesses. It's normal,
Mhm.
I think, when you work in
Yeah.
countries where you have no medical care to come home with sicknesses.
Yeah.
But every American that I would talk to would be like, oh, you ate the food there. You're probably just going to die. Your gut's going to explode. Like, actually, no, I feel worse with this food. I think there is a really popular misconception that like our healthcare system in the US is the best. Our food is
Mm-mm.
the best. Everything we do is the best. And it's just not true at all.
I mean, one of the common reasons people feel worse when they travel is because they have parasites or they get parasites. So that's a common thing.
And we have parasites here in America as well,
Or do.
everybody. Sorry
Hmm.
to tell you, I've had
Yeah.
worse parasitic infections here in the US than I ever did in any other place. So,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah. I'm a big fan of all kinds of herbs for parasites. Do you
Hmm.
work? So when you're working on someone, so let's say someone comes to you, their nervous system is a mess. They need 8 weeks to just work on their nervous system.
Hmm.
After that, do you work with herbs? Do you work with supplements? What are your things?
So I've been on this journey for a decade and it's been a
Okay.
lot of, I do heavy protocols and a lot
Okay.
of my clientele are children and women. And so the heavy protocols with the heavy detoxing, it's a lot. It's a lot of depletion. So in the last 2 years, my shift has kind of moved towards getting the right nutrition.
Okay.
And then some herbs, depending on what they need. But I think getting a lot of the right nutrition in, and then adding in certain things like I do love fulvic and humic acid to clean the gut up temporarily if there's things there.
Right.
Prebiotics, probiotics, prebiotics. I mean, you can get from just chewing fruits and vegetables.
Yeah.
Probiotics you can get from food too, but if there is a big depletion, I've kind of gone down the hole of studying minerals, for example. Like we can do all these heavy metal detoxes and they're great, but they make you feel like poop sometimes. But then
True.
if you do something like selenium, which is an imperative mineral it detoxes heavy metals, it increases your glutathione, it helps you to use your iodine better. So, and there's no detox reaction to it. You're
And
just
you can get it in Brazil nuts, which are
right. So,
tasty.
right. So you got to
Yeah.
kind of look at what foods are you lacking based on this. And, I see a lot of inflammation sometimes in the body. So, if like the heart's coming up in the lungs, sometimes there's a lot of inflammation going on, or a lot of like the blue eyes. You don't have this, thankfully, but some of the blue eyes will have a lot of white fibers, and that's like they're just dealing with a lot of inflammation. So the omega-3, I find omega-3 is really helping, and that's seafood, hemp seed, chia seed, eggs, increasing
Yeah.
that seems to help. So we can look at diet, and then, depending on where they're at, like if they're nursing and pregnant, obviously you have to be gentle, or if they're a
Right.
kid, right? So sometimes food is,
Yeah.
but if they're ready for protocols after a couple weeks, then we shift
You
into
do it.
that. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. That's so interesting. So I love the approach of like nutrition first, and then we deal with the problem areas. Do you find that there are certain areas of nutrition that can totally eradicate the need for protocols? Like, for example, we talked about parasites a little bit. I
Mhm.
have the sunshine eyes, which sadly
Oh,
means parasites. But I already know that. Like, I just finished a parasite cleanse. I'm starting another one on January 12th. It's just an ongoing, I live in the
mhm.
world kind of problem for my body and my system. Do you find that there are certain nutritional protocols that people can go on that totally negates the need for them to do any other kind of protocol?
Yeah, so I started one earlier this year. I didn't get into this health space because I was healthy. I got into this health space because I was broken. I'm
Like
sure
all
you
of us. Yes.
know. And last year was a very humbling experience because, again, like I said, I go towards a lot of nutrition.
Yeah.
And my son ended up really sick last year, and he was unfortunately removed from school. I was working 60 hours a week. And
Oh
so here I was. My
no.
husband works in another state. So I was by myself, 60 hours a week working. I got the special needs child at home with me, and I couldn't, like they said, if he wants to be in school, he needs a one-to-one, which is $10,000 a month. I was like, so he's going to be home with me,
Oh,
watching me work. And the stress, and this is what I say, nervous system is such a big part. I eat super clean, no sugar, lots of fruits and veggies, everything's organic.
yeah.
I'm very careful. Sauna 6 days a week, gym 6 days a week. I
You
started gaining
practice what you preach.
right. I started gaining weight. I started having this like psoriatic arthritis show up on my body. And I was like, what is that?
Oh,
And so the doctor was like, it's from stress. And she's like, have you been stressed? And I was like, just a bit. You know?
yeah.
So I went on this program, which is very much just like flood the body with nutrients, and it's organic, regeneratively farmed. And so you take these shakes and these supplements that are all from food. And within 30 days, all of that went away. And I've been on it, and I gained a lot of weight, but I've lost 75 pounds since I started. So it's helped this
Wow.
year just to kind of completely shift my mindset of we're depleted, number one. But then I started running testing. I was like, I got to get my son on this. He's not well. So I'm
Yeah.
like, as a practitioner, I'm like, I want to run blood work. I want to run hair tissue mineral analysis because I
Yeah.
can.
Yeah.
And seeing the minerals start to restore and the heavy metals go down, I was like, wow, okay. So it taught me that you can kind of fortify your body with the right nutrition. And then what's left over, then you deal with, So if
Okay.
there's still some inflammation, then maybe we need a little bit of supplements. If you're still, and I've had people just take like these green shakes, for example, and pass parasites because the body will kind of fortify itself and release what doesn't belong. For me, that
It
was weight.
wants to. It
Right.
wants to release it.
Smart. We don't listen to our bodies enough. And I think
Right.
that's the other big issue. We're taught to rely on a doctor to prescribe a pill, and that's our solution. It's not. Your
Right.
solution is turning inwards and listening to yourself. And that's starting by listening to your nervous system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. You were working 60 hours a week and you had your special needs child at home. Like I'm still stuck on that. We're gonna get to the shakes in a second, but how did you do that?
Not easily.
How?
No, it was hard. It was horrible. And so it was
Oh,
work with him at home, and I was paying a little bit for people to take him to like programs because I couldn't be there.
yeah.
On calls and then like out at a park for homeschooling. Thankfully when I was in New York, unthankfully, I had to homeschool.
Okay.
Um, I had a little bit of, I actually, my teaching degree was in special education. I became a
Thank
teacher,
God.
and then my son got sick when he was younger. And so that kind of propelled me back into how do I take care of him without
Right.
needing to rely on a medical system. And so it became, I had it under my belt, but thankfully I have two other kids and they were in school. It was, I don't know how I got through it. We were in a rental building a home. So it
Wow.
was some interesting times, but I will tell you, like the impact of just stress, it didn't
Mhm.
matter how clean you eat, how much you move your body, the stress will destroy you.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's
It's
why I'm
so
so
true.
start with your nervous system.
Wow, that is incredible. And so you gained the weight when you were working 60 hours a week and caring for your son at home and kind of homeschooling.
Yeah.
And then once you started restoring your minerals, it dropped.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was having like within 30 days, I obviously am covered. But I had psoriatic arthritis, like from my neck to my knees. It was just like these big red rashes. And it was absolutely like it felt like somebody poured acid on me. And
Yeah.
it was humbling because I'm like, I put people through these heavy protocols and it's supposed to help. And here I am doing
Yeah.
this, it's not helping. So, I kind of on a whim, I have a friend who's a big, she's a doctor in this health space, and she's like, Nichole, just try this. And
Yeah.
I was like, well, how's it going to work? Because it seems too easy,
Right.
we feel like, and I mean, for me, even weight loss was always a hard thing since having kids. It's if you're not in deprivation and moving your body,
Hmm.
all these supplements, you're not doing anything.
I
So then I was
know.
like, okay, just take these food-based supplements and shakes, and it's just like, and then bam, everything's better. So
Wow.
it was a very humbling experience. And I'm like, well, if it could be that simple for me with such a big, complex health list, maybe it's simple
Yeah.
for somebody else, you
That's
know?
amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm assuming we can find all of this on your website.
Oh yeah, I talk about it a
Okay.
lot. You can see my whole transformation.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So the other question that I had for you too is as you do this work, as you work with people all over the world, do you find that so we know that Americans are the most stressed, probably, right? Because we don't do vacations. We take pride in the fact that we have so many vacation days left because we never take our vacation days,
Right.
all of that. Um, do you find that there are solutions for people to kind of get out of that mindset that we can learn from or borrow from?
I mean, I always joke. I say people need to be more like my husband who just a lot of people joke that their husbands, they like, they get on these protocols and they see huge results. They sleep well. Just I
Yeah,
think
men are easier for some
it's
reason.
so unfair.
It
And
is
I'm
so
like, I
unfair.
gain weight watching you eat ice
Right.
cream. But I think
Yeah.
it's been I always joked since I started, I said everybody needs to live like their husbands in the mindset of you just do it. And like, I mean, my husband's a professor. He works in another state half the year. He's also a holistic practitioner. So he's
Great.
juggling two very busy jobs.
Yeah.
And this man he just doesn't stress. He just rolls with it. And I feel like we are so overthinking, over worrying. That's another thing I see in the spleen. So the spleen in special traditional Chinese medicine, it's a lot of the overthinking, over worrying. And I see that show up in a lot of people, especially women,
Hmm.
especially moms. So learning to kind of change your dialogue, talk positively, don't worry about things that you can't handle. If you're in that moment and you're just stressing out about something that you can't deal with, then shut it out. Tell your brain, like, not right now. We're going to do this later.
Yeah,
Um, and whether that's writing it on a post-it or putting a reminder in your phone later. But I feel like, you know, the humbling experience of your job could be replaced tomorrow by somebody else.
that's
Your
right.
family can't. So where's your focus? Your days are
Hmm.
numbered. We don't know how long we're here for. So I feel like the mindset of you're in this space for a while or you're not, but what is your imprint here? Is it going to be I worked like crazy, And I mean, I
Yeah,
guess people are working a lot because of the economy and stuff, but what is important to you? If tomorrow was your last day, what's your priority?
yeah,
People don't care about work. I have a friend in Thailand and she moved there from Italy, but was like spent a lot of time here and it's just interesting. She's like, yeah, we work to work. We don't work to that's not who we are. It's just a piece of what pays the bills.
right.
We don't have lives outside of our jobs sometimes.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. And I
Yeah.
feel like a lot of that is kind of ingrained as we're growing up. Like, not only
Mhm.
are we watching the example of our parents do that,
Right.
but we also learn in school that you need to be the best. We have to be highly competitive. And of course, there are some other cultures that I have lived and worked in where that's also true. But I think mostly it's hard to learn how to just have your job be a job and then go be a person.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
harder.
Yeah. We need to find identity outside of work.
Right.
That's a big thing.
It is a big thing. So what would you say to a person who wanted to get started working with you? I know you have some courses going.
Yes. So
Okay.
I am taking a little, I don't know when you're going to play this, but a little break for the spring. Just my husband's going back to New York for work for a couple months, so I'm not doing one-to-one consults right
Okay.
now. but I'm going to
Okay.
open them up in the spring when I have a little bit more bearing with 3 kids.
Yeah.
They're all in school, thankfully. My son's doing amazing. He's back in school getting straight A's. So I'm taking a
Yay.
little breather because I've been doing this back to back since 2019
Funny. Oh,
every day.
wow.
And it's been really fun, but I'm just like, I need to just woosah for a minute, work on my nervous system. There we go.
Okay.
But in the spring, I'm going to open up my calendar again. And so if people want to book consults, they're more than welcome to. It's all on
Okay.
my website. But I also, I have courses because, as a collective, I'm like, let me put what I know out there. I was a teacher, so I always want to teach people. That's just, I'm like, at least I have that going for me. It's like, I always wanted to
Yeah.
educate. And I feel like, the courses cover a lot of like women's health, children's health. What is a sclera? You will have very awkward conversations looking at people asking about their bowel movements, and it is
It's
what it is.
okay.
But I love having, people are like, look what I see in my husband's eye, and what is this? And
Yeah.
it's really interesting. So I do have a code for anybody that wants to purchase, and it's 80% off of the courses because I don't want them to be something that's a hindrance to afford. And the code is transform. So if you are listening to
Yay.
this, you want to go to my website, you can watch any of the courses and get them just for a couple dollars. And you have access to them. You can go through, there's a little quiz at the end. I made it kind of easy, but then you
Mhm.
get a little certificate. And so you can
Wow.
professionally eye geek at people and have awkward
Okay.
conversations like me.
I think that's awesome. And I also am just so grateful that you're willing to give our listeners 80% off. Like, what a
Oh, yeah.
huge advantage. Thank you.
Yeah. I want everybody to be able to access. It's so easy, and you can watch your own health. If you look at charts, and I will say the sclera does take a little bit of practice because, where like your small intestine is and like your pancreas, like those lines are very close.
Yeah.
So you got to kind of learn to look at symptoms, look at, what's going on with the body and mapping it properly. But the more eyes you look at, the easier it gets. That's all I'm going to say with the sclera. The iris is pretty easy. You can just chart it and it's easy to follow, but this
Okay.
should be something that everybody knows how to do.
I think
Yeah.
that's amazing. Thank you for making this so open for people to learn.
Yes.
I
And I have tons
appreciate
on
it.
my Instagram too. I put
Yes,
tons
that's where I've been learning. Yeah.
every Sunday I call it See You Sunday. So I put a question box, and so people put pictures of their eyes, and I just kind of go over like if they have any it's thing in their iris or some weird squiggles they're curious about, and I just share it, and I don't know, hundreds of little highlights where people can go through and learn.
Yeah.
So
I
I
love
want
those. I've been
to
watching this.
yeah, let's revamp iridology and sclerology, make it like everybody's method of looking at their health.
And helping themselves. Like, I really appreciate what I most appreciate about your work is this like power to the people feeling.
Mm,
Why do we have to put our power to someone else in a white coat who
right,
is like $300,000 in debt for the rest of their lives? So they have to
right.
charge us $500 for an appointment,
Yeah. Right. Take your health back. You guys are totally, you can watch your own health and you watch it transform,
Yeah.
and that's the nice part about the sclera. You can see if it's working or not. So, I mean, obviously follow your symptoms, but you'll be able to watch these lines in just a couple of weeks. I had a client and she did hypnosis. She smoked for 40 years and
Oh,
her lungs
wow.
were so bad. She did hypnosis and I was actually shocked that she was so successful. And within a week, I was looking at her sclera. I was like, oh my God, your lungs look so good. But it was just like this purge.
Yay.
So depending on like how acute it is and how big it is, but something like that was like instant changes. So it was,
Wow.
yeah.
That's awesome. Okay. Well, thank you for inspiring us, Nichole. And thank you so much for being here today. I learned so much. Thank you to everyone who's watching YouTube who looked at a very close up of my eyeball and probably knows. And I'm just so grateful for the work that you put out into the world. Thank you.
I'm
Of
so glad I can share it. Thank you for having me.
course.